Welcome back to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast. I'm your host, Scott Shagory. Here on DT, we talk about scaling great tech companies and helping CEOs do that with greater ease and flow. Today, we'll be talking with Desh Urs. Desh is the founder and CEO of iBridge, a holding company focused on digital transformation in the industries of healthcare, legal services, utilities, and defense, with a global footprint here in the US, the UK, and in India. iBridge offers services in InfoSec, cloud, mobility, outsourcing, infrastructure as a service, among other activities. iBridge was founded in 2004 and is based in Oregon. Prior to founding iBridge, Desh served as a Senior Vice President at TransUnion and a VP at Silicon Graphics. Today we're going to be talking with Desh about the unique challenges and opportunities around scaling infrastructure software as a service companies. Desh, thank you for carving out time to talk with us today, and welcome to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for having me on board.
Yeah. So in a few sentences, what does, to add a little more depth to start things out, what does the company, or iBridge, developing now to help your ideal audience with some, significant challenges and opportunities that they have going forward?
Certainly. So, one of the things that we have found in my journey, and I've been in this industry for a little over 40 years now, it probably dates me very well there, but I've seen every sort of stripe and every change that has occurred through the industry. One of the common themes that we have found that, change is imminent. And I think the changes that we are seeing now, as compared to, say, 5 or 7 or even 8 years ago, it is very, very rapid fire change that is going on, right? It is making us rethink everything that we are doing. I was on a call before with my team looking at agentic AI in one of our products, and it is so disruptive in the thinking process, right? Because all of a sudden now, everything that we thought about 2 weeks ago from an engineering standpoint is being re-looked at, right? And things like that. The one common theme that I have found as a CEO of companies or being a senior leader running enterprises is that we don't seem to understand the value of our information that is built out of the data stacks. And I have been preaching about this for the last 30 years. And some of that challenge came from the fact that it wasn't very well and very inexpensively we were unable to organize those data stacks, and they ran as silos, right? But today what has happened is with good companies like Microsoft and other great companies doing things, it has become a lot more easier to be able to do that. So I think one of the messages that I would give my colleagues or anybody that is hearing this, take some time, understand your data, take some time, organize your data, ask all the hard questions to the operations team that is running these backend systems for you, and ask them for simple answers to your questions. And you will rapidly find that getting you those simple answers is sometimes the hardest part of what they're trying to do for you, because of the way the systems are organized, the technology is set up, and things like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very wise way to start, because it is so easy right now with all of the noise, opportunity, hype, etc. in the AI space that we are often missing some of the very foundational questions in a rush to implement something, to replace a workflow, to demonstrate, both competence as well as, being able to execute and deliver, a solution of some shape or type. With pressure coming from lots and lots of different areas. So, right. Yeah, I think asking some of those foundational questions is often some of the most important, because it does reflect on oneself and the team in ways that, just kind of gets it to the core of who we are and what we're going to do. Is that fair?
Right. And I think that, we have lofty dreams. Every enterprise that I have worked with and every enterprise that I consult or work with every day, we all have lofty dreams. Higher up you go up, the air gets a little thinner and people think a little differently, right? And so the challenge that we all have is there is AI, and there's everything that is like AI, and then there's the practical part of that attaches itself to my business in the boundaries that I've drawn for my company, by the people, by my culture, by my systems, by my customers, the history of the enterprise and things like that, right? So we have to be very cognizant of the fact that, yes, there's a lot going on in and around the industry, and the rate of change of pace is only going to increase. But actually, who am I? Who is my customer? Do I really need this? Is it a fad? Is it something that is real that's going to help my customer? Is it, as you correctly pointed out, workflows and things like that, right? We have been in this arena for a long time, right? The question comes up is that, are we willing to understand who we want to be and who we are, and then adapt and adopt to what is available to us with understanding the limitations of who we are?
Yeah.
That is something that we have learned our hard way ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think with what you're comfortable sharing there? I mean, I have certainly mine, and I've seen, lots of examples of this, things where either they didn't quite turn out or correctly, or were challenging in some way. But I think know thyself could not be more powerful or important than it is now, given the rate of change and what AI and various LLMs are sharing with us and also doing themselves. So do you find that what has been, if you will, your kind of one of the bigger challenges you guys have experienced?
Yeah, so we are blessed with really great customers who trust us. We have built this company. It's been around for 20 years. We have 1,600 odd people. We work in industries that have lots of information, lots of security challenges, and some of our customers are in the nuclear space. I mean, so you think about all these things, and it is just, you just have to understand in this conversation that security comes naturally to iBridge. All these things come naturally to us, but what the challenge is they're looking at us even when we are managing somebody's data, right? Because when we're managing somebody's data, we are typically managing it in their environment. So if data was a major organ in the human body, right? I mean, you would not go to somebody that is not a heart surgeon to operate on your heart. It's not something that you would do, right?
Right.
As good as your internal medicine doctor would be, but him walking around with a knife and cutting you off would not be the plan for the day, right? So then the discussion becomes that if you're allowing me into your environment to work with your data, the question then becomes is all these things that we're working with today in the tools and technology that we're working with today, that we might be even good at doing in our environment, right, and proving it out in our environment as a pilot for what we are doing.
Yeah.
Can we actually make that run efficiently within your environment, within your workforce arena, right? Those challenges are becoming real because some of our customers are extremely particular that even some of the departments, the departments, adjoining departments, don't have access to the information that they have, right? And these are companies that are in high security areas and things like that, right? And so we are working within a very confined environment, right? With sometimes really good technology on the other side, but sometimes just adequate technology on the other side, right? Because they don't have the agencies that may not be as well funded as some of the agencies and things like that. Or they may not have the budget to fund it right now, but they want to get something done, right? The biggest challenges that we face is how do you adapt quickly to that environment, right? We throw things like GPUs and processors and CPUs, and we just talk about it like, always tell people that we throw the word billionaire around, that we don't understand how many millions it takes to add up to be a billionaire. Same thing for cost of running and processing stuff on GPUs, right? Well, just run it on GPU, It's like, no, it's just a cost when you're doing these kind of things. So optimizing algorithms, optimizing, the code that we're running, et cetera, and testing this out in 6 different ways, sometimes can get very challenging in a customer environment. That's one of the things that we have been faced with recently.
Yeah. No, it makes an enormous amount of sense. What does for yourself, for iBridge, given the both opportunity and uncertainty that we've just talked about, what does scale look like to you and the team right now?
With all the turmoil that we have seen within our nation today, right? We are not seeing projects actually being shut down. We went through a difficult phase in between when we were working for our government, but working in another nation. It became a little bit challenging and stuff like that, right? I think that has died down quite a bit. There is. The way things are right now, there's uncertainty. We're all uncertain of what's going on, right? Is this the new normal? I guess it is. And so now we are looking at it and saying that we have to continue business as is. So projects that have slowed down, we are noticing people coming back to the table and saying that, okay, let's just talk about this. Maybe we may delay deployment for a little bit, another couple of months, but the plan is we have to move forward. We cannot afford to wait anymore, right? We are seeing that. We are seeing projects that our customers have had. We just had one yesterday. They lost the entire funding for that project, and I don't know how many hundred people are involved in that, but that shut down completely. So there are things like that that we don't have control over, and I think we're all learning how to manage that. But we haven't seen any sort of massive drop in transactional revenue or strategic revenue at this point in time, right? We are pushing as if things are normal within the company, and we are opening up new frontiers. So I'll give you an example of this, is that we had been trying to open up the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for a while, right? Working, understanding what's going on there. And it took us some time because it's a nation that has its own culture, its own norms, everything else, right? But we're finding ourselves now in a position where we are able to provide value-based services in that nation through partnerships, etc. And that has sort of softened anything that we are losing out in our traditional U.S. European economies that we have been serving for a while now.
Yeah. Is it a case of obviously land and expand, or are you looking at what has been so appealing to you about this potential new market? Is it ultimately been the teams and the partnership and just where the country is moving and some of its foundational elements or choices, technologically speaking, or is it a case of something else that has been appealing to you for obviously some sustained period of time?
So, everybody has opinions about MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, right? And there are lots of differing opinions in different countries about him. I have looked at Vision 2030 that the Crown Prince has been the architect of, and we looked at it very carefully and said that, is this something that we can support, and is it something that we're good at in supporting, etc.? I'm not talking ethical, moral issues. I'm just talking from a business standpoint, right?
Understood. Mm-hmm.
And it is the largest social engineering project that I will see in my lifetime. In my lifetime, there's going to be the biggest social engineering project that is going to occur. And we felt that if we cannot participate or do not participate in that, is something that we will miss, because it's a complete change of how the kingdom is perceived today and the kingdom is going to be tomorrow, right? And there are huge challenges. Huge challenges in that, right? And when we began that journey, and we worked very closely with our government in approaching the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we did it literally all through the United States government, the Department of Commerce, right? And when we did all of that, we began to understand that they are very welcoming, extremely welcoming as a culture. They are very welcoming to Americans in general, right? Which is fabulous. There is no external threat in that region, security threats, etc., in the kingdom for somebody like me. The people that we have met are extremely well educated. Maybe it's a bubble that we live in, right? Every place there are bubbles, and maybe it's a bubble. They're incredibly bright people.
Yeah.
The talent that they have in the Saudi women has been absolutely surprising to folks like us. So it's been a great journey. They work differently. Their decision cycles are different, right? Culturally, they are different. And we are learning. But what we have found is that they have very clear concepts of where they're taking each ministry or each business initiative that is starting, but they're taking it in leaps and bounds. So they are really, really I feel that, the country that we see today and the country we'll see in 5 years, the country we'll see in 2 years, as pockets of development occur more akin to what we see here in the West, we will find that it'll be less and less different in the fact that it's not going to be Dubai, it's not going to be the UAE, but it's going to be a very good blend of an economy that it's a pretty big economy, and it's a pretty big country. And they have understood that oil is not going to be their future. And they are moving faster than I think most places that I have seen.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's always fascinating to me just to see how other cultures or countries, etc., just deal with some of the foundational challenges that everyone faces in some way, shape, or form. Whether it is the developed West, whether it's developing countries or global growth markets, etc. It's always fascinating to see again how they shape themselves in the context of their culture, where they think they and believe they should be going, why they should be going there, and then how to, again, bring people together, bring their country together as a whole to then move in a particular direction and have that be sustainable too. So it's just, fascinating to me as well. Well, cool. That's always, it's just such a great learning opportunity, it sounds like, too, where you guys have all grown in many, many ways and understand something now that many either do not or just don't because of the needs and just all of the unique conversations that have been had. So that's great. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. How do you, either in the context of what we just discussed or say in cloud-based infrastructure, maybe it's in legal services. How do you guys, or how have you at iBridge gone ahead and tried to, kind of uncover that deep intel that has given you some decision superiority over competitors in the market? Because you've been around quite a long time, so there's been plenty of change. And just how does iBridge and yourself, how do you think about that uncovering that deep intel?
So, It's funny, when we started the company, maybe 5 years into it, like any other organization, we had a sales team, right? Mm-hmm. And we found that sometimes the way that you have to incentivize sales team to meet quarterly and annual, revenue targets, etc., was sometimes a little bit of a conflict of who we are and the company that I was building from a cultural standpoint, right? And we moved to a completely different model pretty early, and we said the model is going to be partnerships and channel-driven models, right? Yep. So, which meant that we had to invest deep into these relationships, which also gave us the wonderful understanding of our customers because it wasn't a transaction, right? And brought us close to people of power, people in leadership, and people who actually did the work. Right? And so, as we began to understand that the DNA of the enterprise that we're working with, and people say customer first and all this kind of good stuff, we literally live and die by our customers. I mean, that has been the adage of iBridge, is that it doesn't matter what the customer wants, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter when you process some work for that customer. If it shows up as a request from the customer to fix something, you just fix it. Right? We have had customers who have come to us 3 months later and said, all the not the blame game, but the arguments we had about something that you guys delivered and we thought that was all wrong. We came back, we looked at it, we gave you some incorrect instructions and things have changed at our end, and you need to bill us and things like that, right? Our attitude in life is that if you take care of the customer, you just get back in spades and you understand that, right? Mm-hmm. So as we looked at different technologies, we began to segment our customer base and when we look at our customers, say in a vertical, right? We began to understand that, the customers that we deal with are really smart people. If you think in any industries that we work in, there's some very good thinkers, very good doers, and they have a pulse. There are attorneys that I've met who are trial attorneys that have an extremely deep sense of technology. And how does that happen is whether they are I know some of the guys who actually went to Stanford and became attorneys later on. They were technology guys, and then became attorneys later on, and stuff like that. And they understand this stuff. They really do understand this stuff. So when we are pitching ideas, right, there's a problem to be solved, and the problem comes up in a dinner conversation, whatever it is, and there's a problem to be solved, right, and we are pitching concepts and ideas. We're very cognizant of where the enterprise is today, the kind of people that it has today, and how does it see itself, right, and how does it see its information being stored behind its firewall, outside its firewall, hybrid, all these kinds of things, right? Mm-hmm. And how does it contend? Attorneys are a little interesting because they're in front of a judge, and so there are a whole series of issues over there. Black box technology and stuff like that we so commonly talk about here, and in the world of AI and stuff like that, in the world of algorithms and stuff like that, right? Doesn't sometimes go over very well in a courtroom. So we have to have that understanding of what that end use is going to look like, right? So that is just one example, which I'm sure that people who work with the legal industry already know that. There are other instances of the same thing, right? Understanding what your customers really, really, in the best interest of your customer, not best interest of that quarter for you, right? Mm-hmm. What is in the best interest of the customer is I think is how we have thrived as a company. Is just keeping that conversation always ahead of everything else. And it's a very simple discussion, actually. We have these conversations. Sometimes I get involved in operational stuff in the company, and the conversation comes up is that, well, how do we inform the customer? I said, finish the job, deliver what the customer wants, and then go back and explain. And the people that we deal with are very fair people, and they understand. They may not have the budget to pay us at that point in time, but they always make it up 10 times in spades.
Yeah. No, I think, as a mentor of mine has said on a number of occasions, I'm still in touch with him, as he said, yeah, if your customer understands that you'll protect them regardless of the circumstances as they perceive them to be, and you help them win, and you help them future-proof themselves, even if it's future-proofing the organization and being cognizant of budgetary challenges and other circumstances, they said they will. We're all human beings, and we all have the same basic needs. Yep. And if you can satisfy those and do so with consistent integrity, et cetera, like that, and transparent, honest conversation, you can overcome an enormous number of either potential misunderstandings or just whatever those things end up being, and everybody gets to win. Yeah. So, and that's what we all want.
No, absolutely. Truth prevails, right? We make mistakes. Hopefully not as much as we used to make them, but we do make mistakes, and you just own up to it and fix it. Humans are humans, right? We all, unless there's there are only 3 times in our entire history that we have lost a customer, right? One was very early. We were just a little too ahead of our skis, right? And we got a little too ambitious. We learned through that. Mm-hmm. The second one was the customer just went bankrupt. It's like, okay. The third one was very interesting. We started working with this particular company, and it was a multi-million-dollar development project that we were working with them on. And some of my colleagues, they would talk about this interaction with the customer, and then one of the senior PMs called me up and he said, Desh, I'm really sorry, but I can't fly down to this particular state to go meet with this customer. And I said, is everything okay? And he says, I just don't want to work with these guys anymore. And I said, so talk to me. And so he explained to me, and I talked to the CEO of the enterprise, and I said, there is a problem here. I just want you to understand that, right? And your culture comes top down, right? It's sort of, you got to drive it. And I began to understand and see what this guy was talking about, my own colleague was talking about, right? So we did what we had to do a little longer, changed the players and said, okay, let's see how this goes. In the end, I had a very difficult conversation with the CEO of that company, and I said, we're terminating a contract with you. And, of course, lawsuits were threatened and all this kind of good stuff, and we said we'll transition everything. We'll get it done. We have a couple of partners that we have been working with on this particular project with you. They're all extremely good people. We transition the projects to them. You know them. We'll facilitate all of this stuff. And he asked me, so what's the issue? I said, you just, the way you treat your employees, we don't. I can replace the customer. I can't replace my employees. It's not a question of loyalty to my employees. These are really good people. They come to work for a company hoping they're treated and they're respected and treated with what they bring to the table, right? And if money becomes a single arbiter in the end, right, that is the only reason why you're doing this, well, there's going to be a problem. And so that was the third one. Most of our customers have been with us right from the day we started. They have morphed and grown and acquired and got bigger and bigger and bigger. But we have had them for 20 years. I mean, our conversations more are now about grandkids than anything else. When we sit down and talk, it's not about, so what are you doing, what are you working on kind of stuff, right? And so they know when to pick up the phone and call me and to call my team. And it's a very comfortable place to be.
Yeah, no, that type of value exchange, if you will, on so many dimensional levels is really, really powerful. And if you're at the stage where you're talking about grandchildren and that sort of thing, it just speaks volumes in ways that, so many other companies either are challenged by or just simply never have in any way, shape, or form, because they've been focused on outcomes and very understandable things. But that's always a very, I think, powerful endorsement, which is fantastic, actually. So kudos to you guys and the team.
Thank you.
What do you, if there is something, what do you think is most misunderstood by the market about what your company does? Realizing, of course, you have many long-term relationships, as we've just discussed, but there's always, I find, in the technology space, things that people or teams don't understand about a company or maybe misunderstand. And I'm kind of curious, particularly now that we've had this conversation about people talking with you about grandchildren, is there something that iBridge is, kind of misunderstood about, or that you hear about and need to either correct or talk about with your clients?
I'll go back to that conversation about salespeople, right? If you have good salespeople in the organization, the articulation of the value that you bring, sometimes they do that way better than even somebody like me can do it, right? There's an art and a skill and a science to do that, right? And sometimes we find ourselves stumbling a little bit about explaining who we are, right, as an enterprise. Also because of the fact that iBridge is a combination of 6 different independently held companies with different clients, different leadership teams, different marketing objectives, revenue objectives, all this kind of good stuff, right? What people sometimes is, I don't know if they misunderstand, but sometimes we don't reinforce the different things that we do, right? It's sort of, we're a multi-headed hydra is probably one of the best ways to keep explaining this. Is the other way we have sort of found ourselves talking to people. If you think of Accenture and you think of a little pimple like Accenture, we are one of those companies. It is, we do a lot of cool things in the arena and they do a lot of things that are really good. We're just a very, very minute version of them, right? And so when you have a conversation today, when we encourage our teams, that when you have a moment when people are breathing and you're just talking, even after you've delivered a project, etc., is just to talk to them and say that, I don't know if you know that there's this part of our business that we haven't ever talked to you about, right? Or these are the other things that we do that you may not be aware of. And we do it within your industry for this customer or that customer, whatever it is. So I don't know if it's a misunderstanding as much as it is, we don't have a big, chest beating marketing engine, right? It is done with the idea of information exchange, which probably we need to get better at. But it is about the fact that just making people aware constantly that we have evolved from the time they started working with us to who we are. This every decade, every 5 years, every 3 years, how we have evolved from one side. Now, many of our customers didn't know that we build products, and we have our own products in the marketplace, right? They always thought of us as custom engineering, data processing, information management, analytics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then we introduce our own products to them, and then they're like, well, geez, we never knew you built products. It's a lot of it is us, and also the fact that people are so much information thrown at them all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so constantly staying in front of them, reminding them that, hey, if something like this if you were to encounter something like this in your enterprise, right, talk to us, And that is, it's a challenge. It really is a challenge. I mean, these are great friends of mine, etc. And when I talked to them, they said, geez, we had no idea that you did that, Those kinds of things, right? And so it is, it's work. It's work. But I think some of it is subtly reminding people. Sometimes it's just bringing it up in conversation and saying that, hey, ran into this issue here. You guys are you playing with that same problem? If you have, we have a great solution for you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely challenging. I mean, you guys are obviously have a very good footprint, both in terms of personnel, geographies, the work that you do, et cetera, like that. And I think it would be challenging, and it's easy to forget. And as you point out, all of us are relentlessly bombarded with information that we have to generalize and obviously just discard in some cases, depending, or just somehow don't hear because we're under enormous pressure in some way, shape, or form, personally and or professionally. You do need many touch points, and with all of the work that you do and the ways that you do them, I think it's quite understandable. But it also highlights the opportunity as well, I think, where once that new piece of information sticks about what you guys are working on or what you have as a skill set, or even obviously on the product side, and it adheres itself to that person or that team, they're like, oh, well, let's go ahead and perhaps talk about that and see how we might be able to work together given the strengths that you have with many of your customers. So I think it very much cuts both ways.
Yeah, I think you said something that I'll reinforce is what are we working on, right? Mm-hmm. My peers, the people that I deal with, they just are very curious in what we're working on, right? Because that gives them thought and provokes thought in the enterprise and saying that, hey, iBridge is involved in this area, and it brings up conversations internally for their own companies, right? Mm. And then they come up and they talk about possibilities. We've been thinking about this. Is this possible, right? Does this sort of look adjacent to the stuff that you're working on in this area, kind of things like that, right? So we don't, I am not that person that sends out a lot of collateral and stuff like that. I sort of share what I'm doing in a concise manner that somebody can consume it. And then sort of provoke a conversation or provoke thought in that conversation to say that, okay, talk to me. I mean, the nice thing of having good customers that trust you, you can, what is the right word? You can lay bare some of the concerns that you have, right? Mm-hmm. You can be vulnerable. The word I was looking for is being vulnerable. You can be vulnerable and ask the questions that, what do you think? I mean, am I really going down the right path on this or not, right? Okay. I think that has been one of my most cherished feelings about what we have built in iBridge, right? Is the ability to be truthful, vulnerable, and ask your customers is that we're going down this path pretty hard. There's a lot of money and a lot of resources being put at this, right? Talk to me. What am I missing in this conversation, right? What am I not seeing here? What are the blind spots that we have, right? Because engineers are engineers. They love to build. Love to build.
And they do indeed. Yeah, they do indeed.
It's going to cost $5,000 per user. No. It's got to be around $50 per user. One of those conversations, right?
Yeah, no, it's so true. I love engineers, but there are these things where their eyes just light up at building stuff, and it's just simply who they are. It's what gets them up in the morning or keeps them up at night, or whatever that might be. Yeah. So that's great. Why don't we go ahead and take a short break here, and we will be right back. Purple Finch Group helps technology CEOs innovating at the edge of chaos create operational fitness across their technology stack and team of talent. Achieving significant and measurable scale, selling your story, and finding time to think and plan can feel like a bridge too far. So if you're a CEO whose company has found product market fit, but is struggling, or you're a CEO whose company is looking to accelerate existing momentum, we can help with proven blueprints for optimal scale. Shifting from incremental addition to exponential multiplication can be absolutely achieved with less effort and stress. To get in touch, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Now, back to the interview. Welcome back to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast, talking with Desh from iBridge. So to shift gears a little bit here,
Sure.
Can you talk up a bit about the type of work, the work that you do now as a CEO that gives you joy and energy?
So there was a lot of joy and energy for a very long time until the market blew up right in front of us, right? And they were like, "Oh my God!" We were just sailing right through, and it was do we rethink our strategic plans? And I have a habit of putting out plans for the next 3 years at a time, realizing that 3 years is a long time in our world, and 18 months is more realistic, and things like that. And 6 months is when we begin to look at milestones, etc. Right? There was this moment of just truth, right? That the direction that we are going and the pace that we are growing. It's not about growth for us, right? It's about there's an intellectual pursuit of information and things like that. We are constantly involved in trying to understand that, right? Yeah. So the question was that are we going to be able to continue that while continuing to grow our revenues, or are we going to have to give up that intellectual pursuit conversation, right? And I'm probably not using the right words here, and then just focus on the revenue to keep the business stable, right? Mm-hmm. And there was, we ask this question to each other every year: is it, are we relevant or not? You may be a dying business and not even realizing it, right? And so the question comes up is that if we were to disappear tomorrow, what would it mean to our customers? Are we instantly replaceable? Or is it going to be, oh my God, those moments, right? Mm-hmm. So what has come out of this, especially in this year that we have found out, especially one of our companies that we were constantly looking at as a development engineering company, that company has morphed into a product company. And it was so interesting. 3 of my friends that I talked to about this transition point, and they said, Desh, you already are a product company. You just did not realize it that you're a product company, right? You have become a product company in this particular enterprise that you build. And you are still thinking that it is where you started with that, right? Okay. And that was a wonderful moment because, it took me 20 years really to get here to build from moving from services consulting into a product world, right? Mm-hmm. It tested the team. It tested the senior leadership of the corporate iBridge organization. It tested the leadership of that particular organization because we knew that now there are going to be changes. Unfortunately, some of the changes are going to be people. All this kind of stuff that happens, right? And if you're a family-run enterprise like we are, it is difficult. It is very, very difficult letting people go and things like that, right? One odd employee gets fired or gets resigns or whatever, it's fine. But when you have a group of people that you're looking at, it gets more difficult, right? But the way that the team has transitioned this conversation and moved it, for me, it was a moment of realizing that I've got really cool leaders in the organization that understand what we are trying to do and really are not because I am forcing them into that conversation, right? Yeah. They have begun to understand that if we don't move in that general direction, it is going to cause us more pain over time, right? Their own enterprises, right? The other thing that I think is that, our relationships, again, it comes down to that, even our banking relationships, etc., are very, very solid, right? And so we've never had to borrow money, we've never had to raise money, all this kind of good stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's been a great understanding from our bankers and things like that, and saying that, hey, we are thinking about doing this, right? How can you support us in this process? And they've been extremely supportive and extremely understanding and things like that, and helping us with their product suites, etc., to get to where we want to get to, right? So I think culturally we have sustained. Economically, we have ridden out every cycle that you can think of, good, bad, ugly. Technologically, we have found ourselves to be a kind of company that adapts and adopts and understands, but is not pursuing things because it is a cool thing to pursue. The whole AI engineering conversation in my company came about because we were falling behind in the amount of data we needed to process for the states that we operate in. We're in 28 states, 29 states. It was just impossible because of the funding that came from the federal government after COVID and the digital revolution that is going on in the United States, which is going on very quietly, by the way. A lot of people may or may not be aware of that. We began to understand this is not going to happen. We're not going to be able to meet our SLAs, etc.
Yeah.
So we began to look at automation, then we began to look at AI, and then we started talking to our customers and saying that we went through this journey. Maybe you'd be interested in going through this conversation yourselves, and we can help you with this stuff that we have done, right? And the learnings that we have. So I think those are proud moments for the enterprise, right? That we've been able to manage these changes and manage them well, internally and externally.
Yeah. No, it's a great set of stories that you're sharing here, because it is rooted in relationship, trust, transparency, and a deep commitment to other people and the challenges that they face, and to be able to, if you will, power through them in ways that is deeply motivational for everyone involved because of the culture that you've built. That's just, I think, a hugely powerful story, which is fantastic.
Thank you. It's taking time, taking a lot of work, a lot of patience.
I can imagine. But that's true of anything that's worthwhile. And you guys are a little over going to be celebrating your 21st anniversary this year, at least officially. I'm sure there was work before that. Yeah, I mean, it's 2 decades with all of the transformation, which will do nothing but accelerate here in the next 10 years or even 5 or 3. A lot of firms are really going to, I think, struggle, and they already are. You can already see them start to come a bit unglued, or just miss opportunities, or misunderstand where their clients are because the relationship isn't that strong. So I guess maybe my final question here, as we get closer to wrapping up, would be, how has being CEO of this company transformed you? And I'm sure it's probably done so in many ways over 20 years, but I'm curious, and I always like to ask this, how has it, if there's a memorable story, or what you're comfortable sharing, obviously, something in particular that has, transformed you as the CEO and as the leader of the organization?
I think if you ask my wife that question, you'll probably get a completely different answer. And I've got 2 grown-up daughters, you'll probably get different answers on that, right?
Yeah.
I really think that when I was in corporate America, right, how we interacted and what we did and all this kind of good stuff, was foundationally how I got here. So I'm not going to knock that in any manner. But I think some of the decisions that we were making in our stacks that we ran, sometimes they were not the best decisions, but we had to make those decisions because they had to be made, right? Here, the advantage is that I can make decisions, even if I can make decisions that are best for the enterprise, right? And the enterprise comprises of customers, our people, and the objectives that we have laid out before us to achieve, right? Okay. I can make those with complete conviction that I have had the opportunity to get a very well-rounded opinion from people around me, right? And the organization is run literally as a flat organization. So, I mean, if you participate in our meetings, people are not afraid of saying things, right? They're not afraid of picking up the phone and calling me after the meeting and saying, that was the dumbest thing you said, right? But I think that the moment has been that there have been some really cool moments, right? So when we started the enterprise, we always had a social impact conversation in our mind, right? What social impact can we make? Say that we were enormously fortunate and we made tons and tons of money. We were a little NVIDIA somewhere, right? Okay. The question is that what is the social impact that we would leave behind that would have changed people's lives in a meaningful manner? And we operate in countries as fortunate as the United States, and then in some countries that are not as fortunate as this country in the population, etc. Right?
Yeah.
We have seen that in the 20-year cycle, those little towns that we would set up flag in and set up and bring in internet service and broadband service, and all, now they've become thriving cities, little cities into themselves, right? Yep. We have seen kids graduate, go to college, then have kids of their own, and come back to, they don't work for us, but they come into the offices and things like that. And it's just those quiet moments when you observe that, right? That what that has been absolutely fabulous, right?
Yeah. No, those types of, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, please, go ahead. You were saying something.
I was going to say just those catalytic kind of moments too, where something, in every acorn is a huge oak.
Somewhere
it needs to be nurtured a little bit, and that you've been, if you will, pursuing these activities for such a long period of time, 2 decades or again longer. You do get to see the fruit of that. You see that large, mighty oak that does in fact grow, and you've seen the whole process, which is fantastic. Yeah.
The journey is now, our focus is, especially my focus now, shifted more to the U.S. domestic economy and the challenges we have faced here, right? We're looking at that very closely and saying, how do we contribute into this economy in a meaningful manner, right? And we were fortunate that we have a partner in Microsoft. We are fortunate that we have the Urban League as one of our partners, right? And so we built a product very recently, and we released that into the nonprofit community, right, with Microsoft and things like that.
Okay.
And we are beginning to realize that those things that we do, right, carry more weight than the last contract that we signed for a couple $1 million, or whatever the size of the contract was, right? That has more value, and when we see our teams talk about stuff, right, they will see that even people that are involved in projects that are not associated with that are contributing to the conversation, because they begin to feel that this is going to change lives, right? And so it's a good feeling that we are a for-profit organization that has been able to blend in these different aspects of culture and meaningful purpose that we have, right, into our lives, that people feel that they are accomplishing both sides, is making money and also doing good.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and I think probably a great way to recruit, a great way to obviously channel and communicate about who you are, and as a person, as a CEO, as the team, etc., and just watch that or feel that, if you will, permeate throughout the organization and really anyone that you interact with. That just has a lot of carrying power, if you will, and is impactful at the same time. Yeah, that's great. How should, as my final last question for you, as we wrap up here, is how, with folks who are going to listen or see this, how would you like people to get in touch with you? Via LinkedIn or something else? What would work best for you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. I mean, one nice thing I have is a very unusual name. So there are not too many of me. I'm actually, the last name is the most confusing name of everybody because it's a Swiss first name. And, it's like, okay, so this gets very confusing. But LinkedIn is probably a nice way to do that. If people have any comments or any ideas or something that they want to discuss, my email is another great way to get hold of me. And if you'd like me to give it out, I can give it out if you want to publish.
Yeah, if you're comfortable, but we can stick with LinkedIn as well. That's obviously the easy way.
And they can connect with me there. And the idea of this journey has been really to help other people and seek advice or seek input from other people, right? That what else can we do? How else can we collaborate and make things better? So that has been it's been a great journey.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I very much, Desh, appreciate you carving out time to chat with us today and about iBridge and your journey to date. It's been great to learn more about you and the company and what you guys are doing, and obviously all the people that you're touching. And for all of you out there, thank you for tuning in, and we will be back very soon with another episode. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast, and we hope you found the episode valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast on your favorite platform and leave a review. Putting this podcast together is a group effort, so I'd like to provide a shout out to Heartcast Media and their team for all of the assistance they provide with each episode. If you want to get in touch with me directly, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Purple Finch Group is the sponsor of this podcast. We have another podcast episode out very shortly. Stay tuned.